the speakers of the workshop today have very kindly agreed to participate in a discussion on the current state and the future of pronoun translation. And I'm really keen to hear their perspectives on what we're doing and where we're going. Unfortunately, Kayo and Dayi have to present their excuses for this session. Dayi had actually intended to participate, but he needed to run off because of some urgent situation that just came up in this moment. So there are 4 main topics that we would like to discuss in this session. And I would encourage the audience to participate. So if you have any comments or questions, please use the chat or raise your hands. But I will start by asking the speakers of today to comment. So the 4 topics that we had in mind were modeling pronouns and related phenomena. They were evaluating them, which I think is a really important problem, and what resources we would need here, and finally, what the importance or lack of importance of co-reference modeling for pronoun translation is, or if there are any other NLP tasks that might be important. And so I would like to start with the questions on trends and challenges in pronoun translation modeling. And I would like to start by asking a fairly general question here. So what is currently the most promising machine translation approach that we have if we care about text coherence and cohesion? And what is perhaps the most the unsolved problem that we are closest to solving? I would be really interested in hearing your opinions on that. And I thought I would perhaps start by asking Biao for this question, because Biao has worked a lot on modeling. So I wonder if you could comment a little bit on that, or if you have any ideas here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yeah, can hear you.
Yes, I think there are lots of things happening at this moment about how to add context and how to improve pronoun translation. I'm not very sure about the state of art, or whether to what extent can we see the best method. But I think from what I have learned is that the very simple concatenation-based model perhaps is one of the most promising methods to do this job. I think there are a lot of examples. For example, if you look at the WMT, also, for example, in the previous talk, and we also see how the concatenation method compares with the others. I think the Edinburgh model in that talk is also a concatenation model, but with some sort of pre-training.
Right, that's true.
Yeah, okay, great. And also, if you look at the WMT participation, if we have more data, and I think the concatenation method is also a promising, very promising way to consume this data and to learn the knowledge from the data. And this is, to my knowledge, what some commercial systems used in their system, I think. So that's what I think from my perspective. Maybe the other could add on or have better ideas.
Yeah. Jwala, you were saying something before?
Oh, no, I was just agreeing that,
Okay.
yeah. No, I was just confirming that, yeah, the Edinburgh model also had the context concatenated. And in general, that does tend to generalize better. So these models, I think, would be far more useful because they will work across different languages and so on. So a lot of the other contextual models were mostly working for the language pair that they were fine-tuned for or something like that. And that does sort of limit their general usability for everyone else. So I think something that would, let's say, be less task specific and some generalizes better would be far more useful. And usually the simple concatenating model with some pre-training or some kind of that, yeah, those tend to, I think, work better.
Yeah. Yeah, so the conclusion of that would then be basically the simpler the better. Let's try not to do anything too complicated because it's not going to work. Or
I think maybe I think maybe there are some conditions when we talk about the simpler the better. I think there is an assumption if when we have enough training data. So I think for small scale data set, and it's always better if you have some sort of specific architecture and to think about some linguistic knowledge and to add it as some sort of inductive barriers into your system, and it could benefit the translation. But if we have very large scale data, also by leveraging pre-training, for example, at this moment, we have so many unlabeled data about legal documents, and maybe we could leverage the knowledge from that and to improve the context modeling, including pronoun translation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the one question that I was going to ask was about the distinction between general purpose neural networks on the one hand that just simply try to model the data distribution basically, and on the other hand, specialized models that actually target a specific problem. And that would almost make it sound like, in your opinion, the general purpose model are more likely to perform better given enough training data than. I mean, I found it interesting. It's a pity that Yi isn't here now, because I mean, in his model, he did something like with multitask learning to actually inject some additional specific information, even though the model itself didn't perhaps do very much to model cohesion specifically, but by multitask learning, additional specific information was injected into that. So would that perhaps be a promising avenue, or is even that unnecessary?
Is that a question to me?
And I mean, another question that is relevant in terms of modeling, but also relates to the evaluation discussion that we had today, is how long does the range of the history need to be that we need to have? Because obviously having a very long range dependencies makes things more expensive generally. But on the other hand, there seem to be phenomena that do require long context. But then again, on the other hand, many phenomena can actually be solved with very little context. So where is the sweet spot here? Sheila, I don't know, perhaps you could say something about that.
I don't module machine translation, but I would think that given that we've seen that different issues behave differently in different domains, I think one of the biggest flaws in NLP in general for me is that we don't separate like domains, genres, topics very well. We just call everything domain, and then we just put everything we have there.
Yeah.
So for me, that's one of the biggest flaws, not just in machine translation, but in NLP in general. And I think if we could get to agree on a terminology and say, okay, so we're gonna use, for this topic, we need this much of context to solve, let's say 80% of the issues that we have. I think we could go from there. But I know that Biao said that the more general machine translation, the better it's going to perform. I do have my doubts, and I would love to evaluate that to compare both of them, with different context related issues, because I think the issues, they behave differently because the content is written differently, so.
Yeah. So you're basically arguing that there is going to be significant differences across different genres and domains, or whatever a domain is, but you would expect this to be very different depending on what type of text we translate. Yeah.
So I have something to add there. Yeah. So I mean, I think ideally we would be doing, document level both machine translation and evaluation. So I think, because I think no matter what, I agree that absolutely that depending on the domain, likely the amount of context you need is different. But I also feel like you will always be able to find examples which will need a little more context. I think like, you can always find cases where you need 3 sentences or 4 sentences, and there's suddenly a case where you need 5. And I think you're always going to have exceptions and be able to find cases like that. So I think, I mean, although we are, I guess, not yet there where we can do very well document level empty or document level evaluation, I think ultimately the goal would be to do that, because that's how we would do it as humans, and ideally that would be, I think, the best case. Like,
oh yeah, no, for now that's the best, that's a starting point, and I agree with that, but our aim is to solve, right? So if we want to solve, the direction is there, but the starting point has always to be more general, because we have to understand what we're dealing with, what works and what doesn't work, and then we get our directions. But I was assuming for the solving the problem, that would be I think, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that we have 2 perspectives here. One is the one that actually you, Sheila, already mentioned. It's like, how much context do we need to solve 80% or 95% or however many percent of the phenomena? And then there's probably going to be some sort of trade-off, because at some point you get diminishing returns, obviously. You probably gain quite a lot from using 3 sentences of context, you gain less from 4 sentences. And when you're at 15 sentences, you probably don't gain all that much more by taking 16. But still, there will be some examples where you need this. And I mean, if you think of what a human would do in that case, is a human would probably then recognize that in some specific example, those 15 sentences were not enough, and that you actually have to do some research. And I mean, that's also something that our models never do. We basically just give up on everything that is beyond the line. We don't have the option for the system to say, well, what you're giving me by default is not enough for this specific case. But on the other hand, you probably don't get much credit in a standard empty evaluation for that kind of capacity, I guess, simply because it's not frequent enough, I guess. Yeah.
Maybe I can just add some point here, and I think it's a great point that we should put more focus on the domain problem. I think in your current recipe, we mostly evaluate or test a model maybe based on TED talks or maybe news data, and we didn't look too much on the domain problem. But apart from that, maybe let's say the linguistic issues might also differ if you look at different languages. So what if they discuss problems beyond just English? Think about like Chinese or Arabic or French or German, and they might have some different language properties. So this is also part of what I will discuss later. So if you think about what's happening in machine translation, is at the sentence level, we are talking about massively multilingual translation. Basically trying to handle translation for 100 languages, 100 and 200. Then if you think about the problem there, how to do discourse evaluation or document level evaluation for all these languages, it's a huge problem. Yeah, it's
I think so.
Yeah, and also some other problems related would be like speech translation, for example. There would be more problems, and also translational dialogues. I think maybe Deyi would be the good person, the correct person to discuss this. And maybe also for example, sign language translation. I think recently there is some increasing attention on sign language processing and how to translate the sign languages. It's a different language, but it also has some sort of dependency between different frames between different sign languages. So yeah, if you look at the broader domains and from more dimensions about the translation, language, domain, and modality, I think we still have a lot of problems with evaluation. And also the which sort of content would be useful might also differ for these different settings.
Yeah, so just to add to that, when I was presenting the latest paper, I was at LREC this year, and the amount of people that came to me and said, if I translated the corpus you have in my language, we would have like, different types of issues. We would like add to yours, or maybe some of the ones that you tagged, they were not our issues as well. So yeah, so I would be very interested in checking if the issues that we tagged in our corpus would be the same. I know that we can extrapolate that because it's Portuguese, so French, Spanish, and Italian would be like almost the same. But even though gender in these languages, they change, something is masculine in one and is feminine in other, but but for the other, like more distant languages, I would be very interested to see, because I am 100% sure that we would have different, the issues would behave differently as well, I think. So we need more information always.
Yeah, that sounds like a good goal here. I mean, it seems like we've already moved on to the next point here about evaluation. And the question that I wanted to ask you here is, among the methods that we currently have at our disposal, what do you think, do we have any methods that are really useful to evaluate document level machine translation systems in daily practice? What is the state of the art in evaluating a document level MT system, in your opinion?
Well, the state of the art right now is translators give one score per sentence, giving considering the whole context. But the problem is that how that's displayed to the evaluators, because you just have as big as the screen. So either you have one sentence before and then after, and they can scroll, or they have a few. Before, like at the WMT is the appraise tool, you have like a few sentences. But I don't know, I would think like my idea of what would work a little bit better if we would have like a sliding window through the text that the translator could go and, but I don't know. I think we have to understand first where evaluators have to look in the translation to see what they need to see to evaluate it, and then maybe model something on top of that. But like I said in my presentation, I don't know if the state of the art metrics, the human metrics, we know that the automatic metrics, they do not give a real idea of the quality of the document level systems, but I have doubts that even the human evaluation metrics that we've been using give a real as well. So I don't the answer is I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that is a problem. I guess one problem is that this type of evaluation is extremely costly on the one hand. So that's one reason why people will be reluctant to adopt it more generally. But the other thing is that even though it's so costly, we still have doubts about its validity. I mean, I've also noticed this in the evaluations I did. So I mean, from the point of view of people who work on machine translation development and have a lot of systems to evaluate, what are your favorite methods here? Because I guess human evaluation is to some extent, it's a bit of a gold standard method, but it's also, it's very, very expensive, really.
I think currently most of the models, when they do the evaluation about pronouns, they probably choose some kind of a challenge set or test suits to kind of balance the cost of manual evaluation.
Yeah,
I think for my projects, I think I mainly use the pronoun iPhone score and maybe also APT, accuracy of pronoun translation. The main reason it's not because they are the best, but because they scale the best. It's automatic metric, and it makes some sense. For example, you compare the pronouns, and for example, in APT you use word alignment, and it also compares the pronouns, but just based on word alignment. Although there could be a lot of problems, a big problem with the alignment accuracy itself. But I guess if you don't have human evaluation, and if you don't trust the general evaluation metric like blue And these are something in the middle we could choose.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way, I feel we also it's a bit counterintuitive almost that even though neural machine translation has more or less given up on word alignment as we used to have it in statistical machine translation, when we do these types of evaluation, then all of a sudden we are thrown back on those word alignment models, and all of their problems basically come back to bite us again. So should we spend more time developing better word alignment models, even though we don't need them for translation anymore, or would that be wasted time?
Well, some people might disagree with you because they found adding alignment into the model to supervise the attention might give you better performance. Like the chaos prioritization, attention regularization, and they get better and improved translation results.
Okay, so we should again wait for better word alignment to fall out of better machine translation, basically.
I think there's a kind of a research direction, like people publishing papers on like improving the word alignment quality in neural machine translation models.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gongbo, would you like to go on with the next question?
So the next one, the third question for discussion is, what language resources do we have and need for pronoun translation? So probably, Christian, you would be the first people to start the discussion because you have worked a lot on this and like annotation on these pronouns and translation.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I'm also going to tell you a little bit more about this after the break, because I'm actually going to talk about the resources that we created. But still, so I mean, the resources that I have worked on are to a large extent annotated corpora, parallel data annotated for coreference, which I think is a very it's a very valuable resource once you have it, but it's also extremely expensive to make it, and it's quite difficult to create it in high quality. So, and in the end, you can wonder to what extent this is really the most immediately useful resource for machine translation. So I would be curious to hear like what other people think. What kind of resources do we need most urgently? If there was something like, if we had this, we could really make a step forward. Is there something like that?
One thing I did think about, I mean, I don't know if we would make a significant step forward, but I think in general, one of the things that has generally been found that if you have multiple references, it does tend to improve your evaluation. And I think specifically for pronouns, so one of the limitations that I was talking about is that it's hard to find equivalent translations. So if you have an empty system that's producing a pronoun translation that is different from the reference, but is still equivalent in some way, even let's say it's somehow reordered the sentence and dropped the pronoun, there's ellipses, but it still makes sense. So those are cases that are extremely hard to evaluate and possibly currently just ignored in a lot of cases. So if we had, let's say, several equivalent translations for certain pronouns or things like that, it would be interesting to see if that would improve the kind of evaluation that we're currently able to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely will improve the kind of automatic pronoun translation evaluation. And one more aspect I'm thinking is that since there's really huge divergences across different languages, when we creating these language resources, we mostly are just monolingual or parallel, and it's kind of should we start from this monolingual or parallel corpus, or maybe have some kind of more universal general annotations?
I think it might be a good idea if we can have some resources like Flowers 100. So they are just a multi-way evaluation data set. So you can think it as an English Wikipedia article and manually translated by all the other languages. So in this way, if we can come up with a method to evaluate for some language, maybe we can also transfer and use it to evaluate the other languages as well.
Good. Okay, so maybe it's time to move to the last question. So do we need to consider co-reference modeling for pronoun translation? And are there any other related NLP tasks that are similar and could be beneficial to pronoun translation? I think the first one, the Deyi could be the best candidate to start the discussion. And because in his talk, he has just to show that when we introduce this kind of co-reference links or knowledge, which is kind of viewed as the coercion, with coercion devices that can be used to improve the translation. But probably that's the tricky part, that how we incorporate this co-reference modeling to the pronoun translation model. So do you have any comments about the first question?
I think based on Deyi's work, it's already a successful example to say co-reference could help, right? But I'm not sure, for example, for some gendered pronouns, and even though you know what it refers to, can really infer the gender form based on that information. Maybe you need some word knowledge to say whether that's a male or female. I'm not sure. I'm not expert in this aspect.
Yeah, I think so. This is also maybe like related to the next question. Like in the previous talks, several speakers have mentioned about the word sense disambiguation. Like they sometimes in the languages, the lack of context for the disambiguation, they need some kind of a word knowledge for the disambiguation. And if there's no existing context for disambiguation, even it's really challenging for the AMT models to choose to generate the correct translation. They probably just do the guessing.
Or embarrassing.
Okay, I mean, perhaps we can conclude the session by asking people what they are currently working on, because I mean, that might also be a pointer into the future. So what is the next thing that each of you is going to produce? Are you still working on pronouns even? Or do you think it's worth doing that? I'm just curious now.
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, no, I'm suggesting to ask. We ask people what they are currently working on and what direction they are planning to go. Yeah. So.
Well, my future directions is try to see if the human evaluation metrics need to be changed, or something else, something new. Probably not something new. We're probably just gonna go back to the beginning of machine translation and see metrics that we don't use anymore might come back. Like I think that's generally how we do, and see if that could inform new automatic metrics for But it will include pronouns. It would be something that it has it has to account for sure. It's very important. And I think that the error in the pronouns and in the gender is one of the errors that gets people most angry about, you know, I think.
Yeah.
Especially at the times we live in. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So I've actually sort of moved on to doing other discourse phenomena like lexical consistency and discourse connective translations, and actually then landed on coherence and then into coherence modeling. And so one of the things that I did find was that once we built a coherence model, so typically the way you train them is you have a permuted document task where you take a document, shuffle all the sentences to create an incoherent example, and then train the model to distinguish that. And then one of the things we did was to test it on this data set that someone had created where they manually changed certain things to make it incoherent. And one of the things they did was to change the pronouns as well. So if they would change the gender of the pronouns and or make them inanimate when they needed to be animate, and so on. And it turned out that the coherence model was actually quite good at distinguishing these cases. So it was able to do quite well on telling apart when the pronouns were wrong in quite a few cases, when animacy and gender and so on. So I think this also sort of relates to the task being beneficial to pronoun translation. So it's possible that coherence modeling, or basically just, I guess in some sense, if you have more coherent translations, you are sort of doing better pronoun translation as well. But specifically doing coherence modeling was sort of that model did quite well on detecting pronoun problems as well.
Yeah. 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 Biao?
I'm actually thinking a very interesting problem when the pronoun translation meets homophone translation in the speech translation setup.
Pronoun translations needs what? Sorry, I didn't get that.
The pronoun and the homophone comes together.
Oh, homophone. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, homophone. And this is very a very significant kind of problem in speech translation. So some words and they might have different written form, but in audio, in speech, they are the same. They sound the same, exactly the same. Like in Chinese, we have different written forms for it, she, and he, but in speech they are the same. So we're thinking how to improve the translation for such kind of things, and also how to evaluate it. Actually, evaluation here is also a big problem. Perhaps contrastive test set, or perhaps some other effort. Yeah.
Gongbo?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my work and also the future plan later. So I'm kind of try to kind of it's kind of more related about the first discussion. So about the trends and challenges in the pronoun translation model. So the first Dei and also the Kyle have shown that they propose more specific attention, or to extract features from more specific context to improve the pronoun translation. And the challenge is, how should we select the most useful context for the pronoun translation? And this is the work that I'm going to explore later.
Yeah, that sounds cool. It's all really interesting. I mean, I can perhaps say about myself that what I'm getting more and more interested in is basically what people want to say with something. I mean, it's going towards pragmatics. What do people intend to do with language? So I mean, I've done a bit of work on bias as well. Or I mean, you already, Sheila, mentioned that pronouns are one thing that when you get that wrong, it annoys people. So I mean, basically trying to figure out this kind of thing, like what kind of what kind of things in translation have an effect on people, and what might have been done consciously, and this kind of things. So I'm probably going to spend a bit less time exploring pronouns per se in that case, but I still think it's really interesting, and there's a lot of work to be done here. And I really personally, I really think we need to get a grip on evaluation, because I mean, you need to know what we want to achieve before we should achieve it. And I still feel that even after many years, this is a bit unclear. Yeah. Would anyone like to add something final to this discussion? If not, I think we will conclude the session, and we have a bit of a break now, and we're going to continue at past, so about 25 minutes from now, with my talk and Gongbo's and then Biao's. Thank you very much for participating. It's been really interesting, both your talks and the discussion now. I really appreciate your being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.